The ranch woke before the sun, the land breathing out mist as if reluctant to begin another day. Ethan Cole stood at the fence line with a mug gone cold in his hands, watching cattle shift like shadows across the pasture. Mornings were the quietest part of his life now, and he had come to rely on them. Silence, at least, never disappointed him. The house behind him remained dark. Claire hadn't been home in 3 weeks. Her absence no longer felt temporary. It had settled into the walls, into the hollow spaces between rooms. They still spoke, technically. Messages were exchanged, plans postponed, apologies rehearsed and forgotten. Their marriage existed on paper and memory, little else. Ethan turned as a vehicle approached along the dirt road, a battered van, dust-coated and slow. Visitors were rare. He waited, wary but curious, as it rolled to a stop near the barn. The woman who stepped out looked exhausted in a way that sleep alone couldn't fix. She was small, dark-haired, her posture stiff with both pride and uncertainty. 2 children followed her, clinging to her coat, eyes wide and observant. Twins, Ethan guessed. They said nothing, but they watched everything. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, her accent soft but precise. "My name is Mei Lin Zhang. I was told you sometimes hire help." Ethan studied her for a moment, measuring risk against instinct. He saw no threat, only need. "I do. Sometimes," he replied. "Depends." Mei Lin nodded, as though she had expected hesitation. "I can cook, clean, work in the fields if needed." The twins shifted closer to her, mirroring her tension. Ethan crouched to their level. "What are your names?" "Lian," said one. "Tao," said the other. Their voices were barely above the morning breeze. When Ethan straightened, Mei Lin was watching him carefully, as if the way he spoke to her children mattered more than anything else. "You can stay for now," he said. "There's a spare room. We'll talk about work later." Relief crossed her face, brief but unmistakable. "Thank you." That afternoon, the ranch felt different. The house, once echoing, filled with the quiet sounds of life. Cups set on counters, soft footsteps, the low murmur of a mother calming her children. Ethan found himself lingering in doorways, unsure why the presence unsettled him more than the emptiness ever had. Over a simple meal, Mei Lin explained only what was necessary. She and her husband had come to the country years earlier. He had promised stability, then vanished when responsibility grew inconvenient. She spoke without bitterness, but the restraint itself carried weight. Ethan didn't offer his own story. He didn't need to. The distance in his eyes said enough. As evening settled, the twins wandered the living room, fascinated by everything. When Mei Lin stepped outside to fetch laundry, they climbed onto the couch beside Ethan, their legs swinging. "You live alone?" Tao asked. "Most of the time," Ethan replied. Lian leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "You should marry our mama." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Tao nodded in solemn agreement. "She's sad sometimes," Tao added. Ethan laughed softly, shaking his head. "That's not how things work." Mei Lin returned just in time to hear the tail end of the exchange. Her cheeks colored, embarrassment flashing across her composed expression. "I'm so sorry. They don't understand." "It's fine," Ethan interrupted, more quickly than he intended. Kids say things. But long after the twins were tucked into bed, their words lingered. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Claire's last message glowed on his phone, unread for hours. Mei Lin's quiet presence down the hall felt heavier than it should have. Not because of desire, but because of recognition. 2 lives paused at the same crossroads, each pretending not to notice. In the morning, the sun rose as it always did, indifferent to human complication. Ethan stepped outside, breathing in the familiar scent of earth and grass. He told himself nothing had changed. He told himself kindness was not temptation, and shelter was not betrayal. Still, as Mei Lin joined him on the porch, offering coffee with a tentative smile, he felt the first subtle shift, an awareness that something fragile had begun, something that would demand a choice sooner than he was ready to make. The ranch, once merely quiet, now held its breath. The days found a rhythm quickly, as though the ranch had been waiting for one. Ethan rose before dawn, worked until his muscles burned, and returned to a house that no longer echoed. Mei Lin filled the spaces with quiet efficiency, never intrusive, never idle. She treated her presence as temporary, and that restraint unsettled him more than entitlement ever could have. They spoke most often in fragments, about weather, schedules, the stubbornness of livestock, but beneath every exchange lay a shared attentiveness. Ethan noticed how Mei Lin listened with her whole body, how she paused before answering, as if weighing honesty against caution. She noticed how he avoided his phone, how his gaze lingered on the horizon when silence stretched too long. The twins adapted fastest. They learned the boundaries of the ranch, followed Ethan like shadows during chores, and returned to their mother with stories shaped by wonder rather than fear. Watching them, Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. He told himself it was relief, nothing more. One evening, after the twins had gone to sleep, Mei Lin joined Ethan on the porch. The sky was bruised with dusk, the air heavy with the promise of rain. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from habit. "You don't ask many questions," she said. "I figured you'd answer when you wanted to," Ethan replied. She considered this, then nodded. "That's rare." The rain began softly, tapping against the roof in a steady rhythm. Mei Lin spoke of her husband, Wei, not with anger, but with fatigue. He had once been attentive, ambitious. Then distance crept in, followed by silence, then excuses. When she learned of the other woman, the betrayal felt less like a shock and more like confirmation. "I stayed longer than I should have," she admitted. "For the children. For the idea of who we were supposed to be." Ethan understood too well. He thought of Claire, of conversations postponed until they became irrelevant, of intimacy replaced by obligation. He had not been unfaithful, but he had been absent in quieter ways. The realization sat uncomfortably with him. "I don't know when a marriage ends," he said. "Sometimes it feels like it fades long before anyone says it's over." Mei Lin looked at him, then really looked as though the outline of his life had come into focus. "Yes," she said simply. From that night on, their conversations grew longer. They spoke after the twins slept, voices low, careful not to disturb the fragile peace. They shared regrets, not confessions, and hopes they barely allowed themselves to name. Each word felt like a step forward and a step too far. Ethan caught himself waiting for these moments. He resented the anticipation even as he welcomed it. When Claire finally called, her voice distant and distracted, he answered with the politeness reserved for strangers. Afterward, guilt pressed down on him, sharp and undeniable. He did not tell Mei Lin about the call. The omission felt small at first, almost reasonable. Later, it felt heavier. The emotional boundary shifted one afternoon when Mei Lin received a message of her own. She read it in silence, her face tightening. Ethan noticed the change immediately. "It's him," she said. "He wants to see the children. Says he's ready to be a family again." "And are you?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. Mei Lin hesitated. "I don't know if I can trust him. Or myself." The honesty between them was no longer neutral. It carried weight, expectation. Ethan realized, with a quiet jolt, that he wanted her to stay, not just on the ranch, but in this suspended space they had created together. That evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, the twins sensed the tension they didn't understand. They clung to their mother, unusually quiet. When Mei Lin finally broke, exhaustion overtaking composure, Ethan reached out instinctively. His hand rested on her shoulder, steady, reassuring. She leaned into contact, just for a moment. Neither spoke. The gesture was simple, almost innocent, but it lingered longer than it should have. When she pulled away, they both knew something had shifted. No line had been crossed, yet neither could pretend the edge wasn't close. Later, alone in his room, Ethan stared at his phone, at Claire's name waiting patiently on the screen. He imagined telling her everything. His loneliness, his confusion, the woman sleeping down the hall who felt more present than his wife ever had. He imagined the damage such honesty would cause. He set the phone down without typing a word. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the earth with insistence. In another room, Mei Lin lay awake, listening to the same storm, her thoughts circling the same impossible choice. Between them stretched a silence no longer empty, but charged, one more conversation away from becoming something neither of them could undo. The storm arrived before nightfall, rolling across the plains with a force that rattled windows and bent trees into submission. Ethan secured the barn doors while the sky darkened unnaturally fast, the air charged with something restless and unresolved. By the time he reached the house, rain was already pounding the roof in heavy sheets. Inside, the lights flickered once, then went out. Mei Lin gasped softly from the kitchen doorway, one hand braced against the counter. The twins had already been settled in their room, lulled by the steady drumming of rain. Ethan checked the breaker out of habit, though he knew the lines were unreliable during storms like this. "It'll come back," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. They moved through the house carefully, lighting candles and setting them along the table and mantel. The soft glow transformed familiar spaces, turning edges indistinct, shadows deeper. The ranch, usually grounded and practical, felt suspended from the world beyond its walls. They sat across from each other at the table, the space between them narrower than it had ever felt. Conversation came easily at first, mundane observations about the weather, the animals, but each topic dissolved quickly, leaving silence in its wake. The silence no longer felt neutral. It pressed in, demanding acknowledgement. Mei Lin broke it. Wei called again. Ethan didn't hide his reaction this time. "What did he want?" "She says he's changed," she replied, correcting herself unconsciously, as if repeating his claims threatened to make them true. "He wants me to come back. Says the twins need their father." "And what do you think?" Ethan asked. She looked down at her hands, fingers twisting together. "I think he wants forgiveness without understanding what he broke." Ethan nodded. The word struck close. He thought of Claire, of how often he had mistaken distance for patience, silence for peace. Sometimes wanting isn't the same as being ready. Mei Lin met his eyes. The candlelight softened her expression, but her gaze was steady. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. The question wasn't about Wei. It wasn't even about her. Ethan felt it land where he had been avoiding looking. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been pretending things would fix themselves if I waited long enough." The thunder cracked then, close enough to shake the walls. Mei Lin flinched, instinctively reaching for his arm. Her hand stayed there. Neither of them moved away. The contact was grounding and dangerous all at once. Ethan became acutely aware of the warmth of her skin, of how naturally she fit beside him. He also became aware of everything he stood to lose. The thought did not pull him back. It only sharpened the moment. "This is a mistake," he said, though his voice lacked force. "Maybe," Mei Lin replied. "But pretending nothing is happening feels like a different kind of lie." The rain intensified, drowning out the world beyond the ranch. Ethan thought of the twins asleep down the hall, of the trust implicit in their quiet breathing. He thought of Claire, miles away, unaware of how close he stood to crossing a line he had once believed immovable. He stood abruptly, pacing toward the window. "We should stop," he said. "This, whatever it is, it's not fair to anyone." Mei Lin rose as well. "I know," she said. "I've been telling myself the same thing." They stood there, facing each other, the truth balanced precariously between them. The choice was clear, and yet clarity offered no relief. Ethan realized that restraint no longer felt like virtue. It felt like fear. When he reached for her again, it was deliberate. Mei Lin did not pull away. Their embrace was quiet, hesitant at first, then certain. The kiss that followed was brief, almost restrained, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid. When they separated, both were breathing harder, eyes dark with the knowledge of what they had allowed. They did not speak afterward. Words would have demanded explanations neither could give. Instead, they sat in the candlelight, the storm gradually loosening its grip outside. Guilt arrived quickly, sharp and undeniable, threading through the closeness they had shared. Later, as the power flickered back to life, Mei Lin retreated to her room. Ethan remained at the table, staring at the melted wax pooling beneath the candles. The house felt changed again, heavier than before, as though it were now keeping secrets along with them. In the hallway, a soft sound caught his attention. One of the twins had stirred, murmuring in her sleep. The innocence of it struck him harder than any accusation could have. He understood then that whatever had begun could not remain contained. It would demand reckoning. Ethan turned off the lights and went to his room, sleep distant and uneasy. Outside, the storm moved on, leaving the air clean but unsettled. The ranch stood quiet once more, holding the aftermath of a choice made in weakness, and the certainty that morning would bring consequences neither of them could avoid. Morning arrived without ceremony. The storm had passed, leaving the land rinsed clean, sunlight catching in shallow pools along the dirt road. Ethan woke early, as he always did, but the familiar routine offered no comfort. The house felt too quiet again, not empty this time, but tense, like a held breath waiting to be released. Mei Lin moved through the kitchen with careful restraint, preparing breakfast for the twins as if the night before had never occurred. Her posture was composed, her voice steady, but Ethan noticed what she avoided: his eyes, his proximity, the silence that followed every unfinished thought. The twins sensed the change even if they couldn't name it. They ate quietly, glancing between the adults with puzzled expressions. When they finished, Mei Lin sent them outside to play, giving herself a moment she clearly needed. "We can't ignore this," Ethan said once the door closed behind them. Mei Lin nodded slowly. "I know." She sat at the table, folding her hands as if bracing herself. "What happened last night didn't come from nowhere. But that doesn't make it right." "No," Ethan agreed. "It doesn't." He thought of Claire again, not as an abstract obligation, but as a real person who had once shared this table, this life. He had justified his loneliness by her absence, his silence by her distance. None of it absolved him. "I have to tell her," he said. The words surprised him with their certainty. "Whatever happens after that, it should be honest." Mei Lin looked up then, something like relief flickering across her face, followed quickly by sorrow. "That's the right thing," she said, "even if it hurts." "And you?" Ethan asked gently. She exhaled a long, steady breath. "Wei won't change. I see that now. But I also can't build something new on the ruins of someone else's marriage." The clarity in her voice made the distance between them feel suddenly vast. Ethan realized that what had drawn him to Mei Lin was not just shared pain, but shared integrity. The refusal to pretend consequences didn't exist. They sat together a while longer, not touching, letting the truth settle into place. When the twins came back inside, laughter trailing behind them, the adults put on practiced smiles. Life, after all, continued whether they were ready or not. That afternoon, Mei Lin began packing. She worked methodically, folding clothes, organizing belongings, leaving the room exactly as she had found it. Ethan offered help. She declined with a gentle shake of her head. This, she seemed to say, was something she needed to do alone. Before she left, she stood with him on the porch, the twins waiting by the car. "What we felt was real," she said quietly. "That doesn't mean it was meant to last." Ethan nodded. "I won't forget it." "I hope you don't," she replied. "But I hope you don't let it define you either." When the car disappeared down the road, the ranch returned to its old stillness. This time it felt earned. Days later, Ethan sat across from Claire in a neutral cafe far from the ranch. He told her everything, not to seek forgiveness, but to honor the truth he had avoided for too long. Claire listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she nodded once, as if confirming what she had already known. "Maybe we ended long before this," she said. This was just the moment it became undeniable. They parted without drama, without promises. Some endings didn't need to be loud to be final. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The ranch endured, steady and unchanged. Ethan worked, repaired fences, and learned how to be alone without hiding from it. He thought of Mei Lin often, wondering where she had landed, whether the twins still laughed as freely. He did not expect to see her again. But one afternoon, in a small town several hours away, he did. She stood at a bus stop, older somehow, steadier. The twins were beside her, taller, louder, unmistakably themselves. For a moment, neither moved. Then she smiled, small, cautious, real. They spoke briefly, carefully, lives summarized in a few honest sentences. When the bus arrived, she hesitated, as if weighing something unseen. Some choices don't disappear, she said. They just wait. Ethan watched the bus pull away, the weight of that truth settling into him. He didn't know what the future held, only that it would demand the same courage he had once avoided. The road stretched on, open and uncertain, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt ready to walk it.